Okay, so somebody asked for a video on adjusting the clutch lever free play and the cable on a 3rd gen Magna. So this is what it's gonna be. I apologize for my accent, for the fact that I'm speaking too fast, for the general state of disarray of my Magna, for the fact that she doesn't have the front wheel. It's not lost, it's right here being polished, but it's not gonna disturb us. So we're gonna have two parts, one quick and dirty, another one in all the detail that I could think of for adjusting this clutch lever and the clutch cable free play. And of course, if you're a mechanic with a 30-year experience and you hear me talking complete heresy, well, please let me know. I wouldn't mind. So, quick and dirty version. Clutch cable. When you're adjusting it, you're moving the point of engagement of the clutch somewhere within this range. You have two hard limits. You want it to be completely disengaged here and completely engaged here. You have two adjustment points. One right here with this lock nut and this bolt. If they are stuck, use a bit of loop and pliers and some soft cloth, because you don't want to damage these. And if you just put pliers on them, you could easily chew up this metal, but usually a bit of WD-40 and strong fingers would do the trick. Second adjustment point over here. If somebody will tell you that this is a coarse grain adjustment and this is the fine adjustment, spit them in the face, because the thread pitch over here and the thread pitch over here, if they're not identical, they are about the same. So it comes down simply to the matter of you don't need tools to adjust this one, and you need one or maybe two 12 keys for the adjusting of this one. Usually you will do this one once, and if you need to readjust something, you'll use this one. Of course, you don't have the luxury of the adjustable lever. So these are the only 2 points of adjustment that you have. What I'm aiming at, is for the clutch to be completely released over here, because I'm usually using 2 fingers. And that would look like so. I'm in gear. Of course, if your bike drives, it's much easier, but I have the clutch completely pulled in. If you look over here at the chain, you could see that I can just about rotate my rear wheel without any issue. Now I'm going to start slowly releasing the clutch. Somewhere over here it binds up, which means that I'm probably not fully disengaged, but I'm disengaged enough for that there is enough pressure on the clutch plate so that I cannot rotate the rear wheel just with my toes, and it comes out to being about over here, which for me is a bit too far, let's say. So, if it's too far, you would want it to be closer, because you don't have abnormally large fingers, maybe. Which means that you would want the cable, the whole cable, to be moved slightly closer to you, which means you would want to release this preload just a little bit. In my case, since it's almost in the range what I want, I would release it just about, I want to say here, but see, there is an issue that this slit now faces me, which means that when I pull the cable, this cable has a potential to rub against the sharp edges of this slit, and potentially, in long time frame, fray the whole cable. So I will not put the slit to me, I'll put it slightly higher. Like this, there is no danger, at least I hope there is no danger, of chewing up the cable. And I'll check again. Am I still fully disengaged when I need it to be? Yes. I'm releasing it slowly and checking if I'm fully engaged where it's still comfortable for my fingers. That's about it. And that's about that. This feels about comfortable, but of course, on a standing bike, you will not be able to adjust it perfectly. So from here, I'll take it outside, make a couple of turns, switch through gears, without changing anything, without changing any adjustments, just seeing if it works for me. If it works well, I'll leave it. If it doesn't, I'll probably move this one just a little bit closer to me. Now, of course, there would come a time when just with adjustments over here or over there, you wouldn't be able to achieve your correct position of the clutch lever. Well, that would mean that either you screwed up badly and your cable binds up somewhere, or that your clutch plates are worn out, but that's a topic for a different time. So, that concludes the quick bit. Adjust it over here to where you like it. If this is not enough, release this one either completely or put it in the middle of the travel, come back here and start adjusting it over there. Release this one. If you screw this nut in, it moves this whole assembly out, which means it increases the preload on the cable, which means that your engagement point would move further out. If you release this nut, it would move this assembly closer here, which would release the preload on the cable, which move the whole engagement point closer to you. That's it. Quick version. Now, the long version. The long version is, before you do this, before you do all these adjustments, you want to make sure that all the cable, all the pivots, all the mechanics in between is working properly. So usually it would mean that you'll have to remove this cover, clean and lubricate this shaft, then go back to the cable, make sure that the cable is lubricated and sliding freely in the cable housing. Come back over here, make sure there is nothing that binds up in the lever itself, make sure that the lever is not worn out itself you can remove this pivot, oil it inside, and then after you've made sure that the whole mechanics is working properly, then you would repeat the same procedure that I did right now with just small adjustments over here and over there to get it to the spec. Now, things to be careful of is that, of course, when saying lubricating the cable, that could mean anything and nothing. Besides, to get to the cable, you need to release the whole of this cover. Note that I'm just releasing the bolts a little bit. This is steel on aluminum, so this is not the best friction pair. So if you haven't removed this cover in ages, it would be stuck. And be careful not to shear the bolts. Make sure that you're not just sticking your key a little bit and applying an insane torque. Make sure you have a proper key that engages properly in this hex so that you are actually unscrewing the bolt rather than breaking the bolt. And of course, it would be very easy if all of these three would be the same, but they're not. This one is a little bit shorter compared to the other two. Usually, when I remove them, I put them in this order, and the third one will go over here, because then they'll go in exactly the same order, if I'm removing it for a moment. Now, the whole thing is released. It still holds on one of the bolts, but I can already release this cable. Now, as you can see, it still holds because I did not release the last bolt, so now I can do that. And there we go. It's out. Usually it should come out without any issue, but of course, if yours hasn't come out in ages, it would look dirty here. It would be gunked up. It would be a terrible mess over here. This usually would be the dirtiest place on your bike because the chain is throwing all the oil and dirt. So the places we are concerned with are right here. We have this shaft, which can be removed just by rotating it a bit in and out and simply pulling it out. So you can see it has the mid place where you could very well apply proper thick grease. As you can see, it has an inset which, when you're rotating the shaft, would be pushing out this little bit. Now, this little bit, if it's well oiled, it will not want to come out easily. Do not use pliers on it, as I'm doing, because you want to remove it without damaging it, especially without damaging this bit. Because if you manage to damage the tip, then it will not mate properly with the rod that it is pushing, and you do not want to have that. As you can see, it has an sort of O-ring sealant on it to keep the oil inside and the dirt out. And of course, by removing it right now, I screwed up the internal ecosystem of it. So before putting it back in, I would want to wash it. I will use WD-40 as a washing fluid. Just squirt it all in there. It's not going to hurt it. Then I'm going to apply some thick grease, if I would find any thick grease around here. And of course, I mean, I removed it recently, so I know that it's not damaged. I know that it's in a reasonable condition, but usually I would wash it, inspect it carefully, see that there is no undue wear, that it's still circular, rather cylindrical to my taste. Then add a bit of grease and stick it back in. It will usually just remain hanging on this O-ring. It's not all the way in. If you push it just a little bit more, now you see that now it is all the way in. Now, coming back to the shaft that I removed before. Of course, you would want to remove the spring. Of course, you would want to clean the spring. Of course, you would want to check that the spring is still in spec. But I did that already, so I'm just going to wipe it off from the dirt. I'm going to... And you can see right here, this is the wearing area. This still does not feel like it is out of circular, but probably I'll have to change it sometime soon. But for the moment, just a bit of grease will keep the elements out and make sure that it can rotate without a problem. Note that I just squirted some WD-40 over here, but I did not do anything with this opening. Usually you would do both. You want the thing to be really clean. But what I did is more of a demonstration. Now, as you hear, it doesn't want to go all the way in because I've pushed in this little bit, which means that I go back doing the things that I shouldn't be doing, namely grabbing it with the pliers and pulling it out. Now it's about halfway out, about to the O-ring, and that's perfectly enough to push this shaft in. So now they could, yes, now they met, they are fine. If I'm rotating this one, you could probably see that it pushes out the other rod. I feel no binding up anywhere in the travel, so for the moment it's all good and done. It can go back. When you're putting it in, note that this hole is slightly outside, so please make sure you do not squeeze this rod under this housing like so and then just attach it in and bend your rod. If something doesn't go, then probably it is in the wrong place. And that's about it. It's about in there. Now I'm just gonna push the bolts in a couple of threads so that they don't fall out. Note I am not torquing them to the proper spec as of yet because I didn't attach the cable yet. And so in the proper torque spec, the workshop manual calls here for 10 Newton meters. But this one is going to come out at least 5 times more before it goes back on the road. So now back to the cable. We want this cable to travel through this housing without any binding up, and we want to be sure that there is no rusting up inside of this cable cover. As you see, mine moves quite freely because I did this operation just recently. But in principle, if you push it all the way in, you could easily align all the openings and pull your cable out through one, through second, and from the clutch lever. Now, you could of course get a separate fixture for oiling the cables, or you could just use patience and squirt a bit of cleaner or lubricant in there, move the cable just a bit, and repeat it until you see your oil coming out from here. note that WD-40 is not a lubricant. This is a water displacer. This is marketed as a lubricant for the cables, but in the end we just want the cable traveling freely. We just want the cable traveling freely, and we don't want any rust in there. Because on our old bikes, sometimes the whole thing is so rusted up that the cable barely moves in there, and then you're wondering why you can't get a proper cable adjustment, a proper clutch lever adjustment. So, since we're here, usually what I will do next, I'll inspect the lever itself. I'll check its play in this plane. So you see it's shaking a little bit, but still, I don't know, to my taste, okay, but probably I'll be changing the levers anyways. I will remove this bolt. I will not be removing it right now, but I could remove this bolt and clean everything inside here. It's just a flathead over here and a 10 nut below here. And same principle applies. Clean, grease, reassemble, check if everything moves freely, and get back to assembling stuff back. There is a hole right below there into which this barrel goes. So right now it's inside the lever, inside the housing of the lever, inside the lock nut, inside the adjuster nut. So I can put it back in, make sure that it doesn't fall off, go back over here, and since I did not attach the cover completely, I could easily rotate it out and hang the cable back in. So now I can screw this 3 bolts back. I'm screwing them in finger tight because, as I said, it's going to come up at least 5 more times. And of course, before putting it in, I would like to clean it. I would like to polish it more because right now it's fairly clean, but it could be cleaner, it could be brighter. So now we will do exactly the same thing that we did before, namely, we are in gear. I can rotate the wheel with the clutch completely engaged. I release the clutch until it binds up, and I'm about there on the lever, which probably is fine, but let's just say I want it to be a bit closer to me. So quarter turn at a time is fine, half a turn at a time is fine. I know that I'm somewhere around the spec here, so somewhere over here I should still be quite engaged. So I can not really rotate it. Well, I cannot rotate it easily. And then pulling it back all the way, I can just about rotate it. So that is about as adjusted as it needs to be for the moment. Of course, I would probably do some fine 1/8 of a turn adjustments once I can drive, and it doesn't make sense to measure it because you will be doing it on feel. So that concludes my extremely long, extremely detailed video on adjusting the clutch cable. Thanks, stay safe, and respect the machine spirit.